So, welcome back. We're now trying to bring it all together. Lots of concept that we talked about, and Gina and Perry will help us to just reflect on it. I just want to share with you in some way the experience that I have going through this course. We're starting with the big issues. And we're starting with looking at what are the challenges that the world is facing. And what are some of the managerial implications? What are CEOs thinking about? Larry Fink, one of the largest investors, is telling CEOs, you need to change. You need to change an approach of managing your organization. In this course, we're looking at the traditional way of management, which is basically represented by the triangle approach, which is efficiency and effectiveness concerns. That's what it is. And now what increasingly matters is, on top of that, the ethical concerns. Why are you doing what you're doing, and are you doing the right thing? And that is a major shift in the conversation about organizations, and many CEOs are struggling with that. So for students, I just want you to understand that this is a huge opportunity for you to be ready and future-proof in a certain sense to address these issues that are currently that our current CEOs are struggling with. And what they're struggling with is a mindset issue, right? They have a certain understanding of what business is supposed to be, what success is, and how to run an organization, how to make teams work. And much of the conversation in this class has been about these things, like how do you succeed at the individual level, at the team level, at the organizational level. And I think to understand success, you need to go deeper and understand what does it even mean to be successful. In the traditional way, it is potentially to be rich, to be big, right? To sell a lot and to earn a lot of profit. In the more modern way, or more appropriate humanistic way that we're exploring as an alternative, is it's like, okay, maybe it's about how much you are actually happy with your life, how happy you are with what the team is achieving, how much it is a purposeful activity, how much you're actually contributing to well-being at a higher level, how much you're able to contribute to the solution of the many problems that we as a species are facing. And then sort of revert back and say, okay, how can, if you do that, you do it effectively and efficiently, be profitable. And see profit as a means to an end rather than an end in itself, which it has become. So that's basically the storyline, and then I just want you to sort of maybe respond to what stuck out to you, what you find meaningful and relevant, even in your job, in your position, in your work.
Yeah, one of the things that sort of has been really impactful throughout the entire course is the idea of starting with the self and really working on how you want to position the self relative to the larger organization. And so if I'm a leader who's beginning with myself, I might ask myself that question, you know, what does success look like for me? And what is my currency? Is my currency only making money? And sure, I think it's reasonable to want to be rich in a capitalistic society. But what is there a cap to that? And at some point, does making more money at the expense of people take away from resources that I could be gaining, you know, other than that? So I like the idea of starting with the self and really figuring out what my paradigm is, and then using that as a jump off for business, because that's just not how any of us learn.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And to that point, I think we talked about it earlier, I think you can apply the concept of finding your passion anywhere. And, you know, we talked about the hedgehog concept, but I know for me personally, in my experience, when I was trying to figure out what's my next step and where I move within my organization, you know, my chief of staff came to me and said, follow the hedgehog, find what your sweet spot is. What are you deeply passionate about? What's going to drive you? And what are you best at? And that will help you have that disciplined thought to think about, so here's some of the things that I'm really, really good at. These are my sweet spots. And I think taking that step back and doing that more introspective work, I think is important. It helps you to be managed yourself, helps you to be managed within the context of organization, and really thrive in whatever you choose to do to be great.
Great. And what else sort of stuck out to you in the conversation? Like we're basically like, it's almost a philosophical course that is in very many ways practical, right? And in trying to address the issues of how to do it, right? At the same time of why to do it and what to do, right? And those are the critical questions. Those three I would just throw out. Why? The most important, which is missing right now. That's why Simon Sinek gets so much play. Why he's like, oh, okay, well, he's bringing out something in a conversation that most people haven't even thought about, but that seems to resonate and is relevant, right? And then what? What to do? How to address these issues, right? Etc. And so we've had the concept of the bagel. We had the concept of creating shared value and business at the base of the pyramid. And all of these are concepts that are created out of new imagination and rethinking what you might consider traditional capitalist, whatever, models, which is quite interesting to unpack if we think about capitalism. What does it even mean? Most people don't really understand it, but they use it as a metaphor for just sort of being careless and wanting to get monetary gains. Right? But I don't know if that's where you're coming from. But I think it might be good to sort of understand, like, okay, these metaphors exist, these labels exist, but they don't necessarily constrain us in our imagination. We can do a lot more. How would that resonate with you?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with the capitalist piece. You know, there is a version of capitalism that I can conceive of that is about, you know, greed and sort of getting everything. But there's also a version of capitalism that I think, and I bring this up because there's this argument that, you know, trying to do this more humanistic business practice is a shift into some other sort of, you know, economic tradition, and that just doesn't have to be the case. There can be a version of capitalism where mutual regard is, you know, maintained, and all that. And the example that I always give when I have this conversation about this other version of capitalism that I can imagine is if I were, if we didn't have the transportation we have now and I were living on the coast, and, you know, someone else was living inland, and they had a herd of sheep, and I had endless amounts of fish because I'm by the ocean, to send them home with as much fish as they can carry, and for them to bring to me as many sheep as they could carry to me, and to have that exchange, and for them to say, oh, wow, I think I got over on this deal because I got all these fish. I don't need it. I don't really need the sheep. I have so many. And for me to say, this is a resource I just don't have, you know, this is great. And so it's this mutual benefit and feeling of profit, feeling of gain, even though it didn't actually take away from anyone at the human level, and it didn't have to take away from anyone's dignity. It wasn't a trick. You know?
Interesting, right? And I think what I hear from you is like, this business is something we can create, and we can do it in a way that we enjoy it, right? And it doesn't have to be trickery, right? And I think, unfortunately, most people think of business as that. And that's, students, just to remind you, that's sort of what we call the notion of economistic management. The idea that we are Gordon Geckos. We're all in it for ourselves. We don't care much about anybody else. And therefore, cheating is great. And who cheats the best is the winner in that game. That's an idea that's very pervasive, and I think you're responding to that in some way and saying, okay, this doesn't have to be the truth, the reality, because we can create it. We can create other stories. And the humanistic story, students, is the one that I wanted to make sure that you are aware of. I'm not saying and preaching that this is the only story, but this is one other way that you can think about it. And when you then see at least two stories, two possibilities, you can come up with your own, and you can be more imaginative, and you see you're not stuck in one model. As William Allen said, you're not, like, the mindset is not blocked. You have different mindsets, and you can play with them. Anything that comes up for you with those thoughts?
Yeah, you know, for me, I think when you talk about humanistic management and kind of businesses taking more of a social element to their business practices, you know, it's not about growth and profitability. It's about their social impact, you know. So Unilever, you know, using that as an example, they saw the need that, hey, you know, we need to pay more attention to our small agricultural farmers. You know, how are we treating them, our supply? You know, a cause that's, you know, dear in terms for them is, you know, the sanitation, you know, and how all of these different areas they want to address really kind of are the ecosystem to have a successful environment, you know, and working with certain people within that environment to be successful. So for me, I like the not only the humanistic approach in the lens, but also the social impact and what that growth looks like.
And then, in some way, the ultimate outcome can be something that we can't even fathom right now. It's sort of like, you know what, maybe we, as you were sort of saying, we have a situation of abundance. We know that there is enough, right? And we can thrive with enough. And maybe there is more ways than one to advance, right? And as a social species, maybe we do it best together. And all of these things, students, could be sounding like a pipe dream. And I hope that you can get the value of thinking that way and having the ambidexterity, we call it, the ability to think in at least two ways, and then understanding, you know, that maybe one way that's dominant right now, which we label the economistic way, and then there is an alternative. You're not stuck in that, right? You're not bound to be miserable. You're not bound to be disengaged at work. You're not bound to be a manager that destroys the planet if that's what you value. If you're not bound to be sort of an quote-unquote son of a bitch, because that's another term that people are using to describe business people, right? To describe managers, to describe good ones, good, real managers. And clearly they exist. We talked about that in a prior lecture. Those are called psychopaths. And this psychopathic model is very pervasive, unfortunately, right now. What the course is trying to do is to showcase, yes, it exists, and there are other possibilities. There are other ways to conceptualize management, and probably better ways that are also allowing you to be successful.